Ambassador Billy Modise, affectionately known as Uncle Billy or Bra Billy, was born on 18th December 1930 in Bloemfontein, in the then Orange Free State. Gautengwe George and Khobonaweng Lizzie Modise. His brothers were Lebogang Edwin, Ubuditse Joseph, and Lipile George, and his loving sister Dorothy Mohapi. The apartheid system constrained opportunities for black people, and Modise's initial ambition was to become a delivery boy, following in the footsteps of one of his uncles who delivered mail on a bicycle.
We have lost a great South African, a freedom fighter, and above all, many of us have also lost a dear brother and a dear friend. We gather here to bid a fond farewell to Ambassador Billy Modise, who I, like many others, came to fondly call Billy or Uncle Billy. We come to say goodbye to Billy as we remember Nelson Mandela and Mama Albertina Sisulu, who both would have turned 100 this year. We are drawn to this place to remember Billy and to celebrate his life, not for the sake of ritual, duty, or protocol. We are drawn here to pay our respects out of a deep and abiding affection for Comrade Billy Modise.
Between 1950 and 1954, he worked at a wholesale store and for a medical doctor in order to raise money for his university studies. In January 1955, he enrolled at the University of Fort Hare to study for a Bachelor of Arts degree. As a student at the UFH, he came into contact with Professor Z.K. Matthews and Govan Mbeki, who inspired him to become politically active. This period marked his introduction to formal politics, which shaped his commitment and lifelong dedication to the struggle against apartheid. He joined the African National Congress in 1955 and was soon elected secretary of the ANC Youth League UFH branch.
However, I must repeat that biography tells us that for 63 years, from 1955 when he first went to Fort Hare, to 2018 when he finally left us, Billy was a loyal member and activist of the African National Congress. It therefore stands to reason that that membership of the ANC surely defined in very good measure who Billy Modise was and dictated what he did. And this is because, as we all know, the 6 decades during which Billy was a member and activist of the ANC were very critical in the process of the making and transformation of South Africa, and therefore the evolution of the ANC itself. Thus, in Billy Modise, we have one of those comrades who has been present as an actor in the process I've just mentioned of the making and transformation of our country and the evolution of the ANC. And as we all know, this was a process which, among others, included a most determined and multi-sided struggle within South Africa, with the broad liberation movement united around the Freedom Charter, combined with a similarly determined and truly massive international movement of anti-apartheid solidarity. With both of these offensives, the domestic and the international, which obliged the apartheid regime to enter into negotiations with the liberation movement to end the system of white minority rule.
He also served as secretary of the Student Representative Council. He later became an executive member of the National Union of South African Students. Whilst at UFH, Modise met Dr. Rosemary Bokwe, and there began the love story. A physician and gynecologist whose father was a composer, John Knox Bokwe. Dr. Bokwe had 3 children, Yolisa, whom Modise married, Boy, and Nomsa. In January 1960, he was asked by NUSAS to attend a conference in Switzerland. He declined, fearing that applying for a passport would result in his arrest, given his active involvement in politics. The Lund University students in Sweden offered him a scholarship to study medicine, and the British Students' Union paid for his ticket from Accra, Ghana, to London. The ANC arranged that he would be on their only chartered flight to lift South African ANC refugees from the then Botswana land, now Botswana, to Accra. When he got to Botswana land, his contact was gone and he missed that lift. He therefore hitchhiked to Tanzania and later got on a plane to London. In Tanzania, this is where he met his first Swedish encounter, a missionary, Barbro Johansson, who facilitated travel from Tanzania. Modise played a critical role in laying a strong foundation in Sweden that paved the way for future relations between the ANC and Sweden. As a result of his tireless efforts, Sweden became a very central part of the struggle against apartheid. Upon his arrival in Sweden, Modise began mobilizing student formations against apartheid and networking on behalf of the ANC. The strategy was to isolate and boycott all South African products.
It's an honor for me to be one of the persons asked today to talk about our beloved friend, Billy Modise. But first of all, and on behalf of the Swedish government and of the Swedish people, I would like to thank Billy for making the Swedish society aware of the unjust and immoral system that was apartheid. You woke us up, Billy. Through your tireless explaining of the injustice and cruelty of this awful system, and through your strong argumentation for boycotts and sanctions, you made the Swedes aware of the crimes committed, and you made us engaged in the struggle for democracy and human rights. And for this, we thank you very much. I also have a greeting from the Swedish government through the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, Annika Söder, who would have liked to be with us here today, but I will quote her words. Billy was not only a good and lovely friend, Billy was also, in its deepest sense, a wise person, a person who knew his values, his ethical compass, and stood by them. A statesman, a true freedom fighter, and I'm glad I got to meet him yet again on my latest visit to South Africa 2 years ago. His wisdom and warmth will stay with us forever. End of quote. And I would like on my part to tell the story about how Billy, early on after his arrival in Sweden on a scholarship to the University of Lund in 1960, how Billy took on the then Prime Minister of Sweden, Tage Erlander. Tage Erlander was an alumni of the University of Lund and came annually to Lund to speak to the students. And when the formalities and the speeches were over, Billy, as always on the go, made his way up to the Prime Minister and told him what was going on in South Africa and asked him to introduce boycott and sanctions on South African products. So Tage Erlander listened very carefully to Billy and then made the point that Swedish law did not permit him to introduce sanctions against a country with which Sweden was not at war, and we were not at war with South Africa. But, he said to Billy, please go ahead and lobby the Swedes for a change in legislation, and I shall be more than happy to oblige. And Billy set about engaging the Swedes. Biking and hitchhiking around the country, he talked to political parties, to student organizations, to the labor movement, to women's associations, to churches. Well, he spoke to everyone he could possibly reach. And with convincing facts and arguments, Billy reached results. But I would also contribute his success to his gentle, persuasive powers and his mischievous and charming personality. Few could resist Billy. And before long, the Swedes were engaged and active. Consumer boycotts were initiated. It was no longer okay to buy Cool marmalade or South African fruit. Demonstrations were held and collections for funds were arranged. Choirs gave concerts in Zulu and Xhosa to raise money for the struggle. And the Swedish government initiated, with broad support in the Swedish parliament, what was later to become a very substantive contribution to the struggle against apartheid. And this, all of this, very much thanks to a young South African student. Billy and Modise, of course, made many friends in Sweden and continued to do so when you were in Lusaka, working for the UN Institute for Namibia. And since Billy's passing, many Swedish friends have contacted me with stories about their contacts and life together with Billy and Julissa. With your strong integrity and great wisdom, you will always remain an icon to all of us. So finally, from your Swedish friends, farväl, vi kommer att sakna dig. Vila efter kära Billy. Thank you very much.
What gave hope to the ANC that they could achieve their objectives was a distinctly strong egalitarian credo that Sweden and other Nordic countries had given that they had never been colonial powers and hence had not created the seemingly insoluble problem of the colonial master always remaining the colonial master. Whilst in Sweden, he met and lobbied Olof Palme, the then Prime Minister, at a function. The Prime Minister advised that the ANC strategy should in fact be to request the Swedish people to pressure the parliamentarians to support the struggle of the people of South Africa against apartheid. During one of his visits to Lund, former Prime Minister Tage Erlander explained to Modise and his fellow revolutionaries that according to Swedish law and practice, economic sanctions could not be declared against a country that Sweden was not at war with. Sweden was not at war with South Africa in the legal sense, so they could not apply sanctions. He, however, went on to explain that if the ANC was able to persuade the ordinary Swedish consumer not to buy South African products, there was no problem. This posed a major challenge to Modise and his comrades, as it effectively meant talking to every Swede to say, don't buy South African products. don't export to South Africa, as they could not stop goods from entering Sweden. Undeterred, Modise addressed student structures as this was his base. He traveled to Gothenburg, Stockholm, Lund, talking to high schools all over Skåne, informing them about the situation in South Africa. Modise was a founding member of the South African Committee in Lund alongside Lars Erik Johansson, Ulf Agrer. The committee convened meetings, printed posters, pamphlets, lobbied parliamentarians to support the struggle against apartheid. He also mobilized students from other political movements in Africa, and his tasks were extended to cover liberation movements from across Southern Africa. His work also covered other Nordic countries, and while in Norway, he attended the 1961 Nobel Peace Prize ceremony for the late Chief Albert Luthuli. Brabili and Jolisa were married on 23rd March 1964. Friends and comrades donated money to celebrate the occasion. Shaga Lalu, who passed on recently, prepared an outstanding wedding feast.
We never forget our friends. We never forget our comrades. Comrades in arms, comrades who prepared us to be where we are today. Then, why we are all remembering Bill? Because he stayed young too long. Billy was always too young. As a teacher, he was too young. As a diplomat, he was too young. As chief of protocol, he was too young. And therefore, when the time came for him to be old, we did not want to accept that. That is why we have problem in accepting his departure from here. It is now our duty to take the torch and do what we can. I know we will not be able to do it the way only Billy Modise could do, but still as Africans, we should do our share.
They were blessed with a daughter, Buntle, and a son, Tsepo, both who have sadly passed on. In 1966, the ANC Youth and Student Section was formed, with Thabo Mbeki as its leader in Britain. The ANC YSS had two main objectives: looking after the welfare of the ANC youth and mobilizing youth against apartheid international. Modise was one of the ANC YSS leaders alongside others, including Joan Glantler, who later played critical roles in the country's transition to democracy. In 1975, Modise was sent to New York in the United States to work for Habitat, the United Nations Conference on Human Settlements. His role was preparing policy papers on issues of resettlement. Between 1976 and 1988, Modise was Assistant Director of the UN Institute of Namibia in Lusaka, Zambia. Working under the current Namibian President, Hage Geingob. The Institute provided training in political science, sociology, and education. In 1988, he left the UN to work full-time for the ANC under the leadership of Comrade Oliver Reginald Tambo. He was subsequently deployed to Sweden, where he served as the ANC's chief representative. Modise returned to South Africa in 1990 and was deployed at Shell House, the former ANC head office in South Africa. He was tasked with heading the Matla Trust, which was established to prepare for the first democratic elections in 1994. After the elections, Modise was posted abroad as South Africa's High Commissioner to Canada in 1995. He also served as the Chief of State Protocol under former President Mbeki from 1999 to 2006. He retired from the administration in 2006 but continued to be actively involved in politics. Modise was an integral part of the 101 stalwarts and veterans who were signatories to the document for the sake of our country, who came together due to their serious concerns about the trajectory that the ANC had taken. He passionately believed that the practices of those who were in power had deviated from the historical mission and revolutionary task of the ANC. In addition to his firm commitment to politics, Modise had a number of other passions, including ballroom dancing. He participated in numerous competitions which covered the various forms of dance, such as the foxtrot, the cha-cha-cha, the tango, samba. Together with Rupia Banda, former president of Zambia, he also formed a popular band called Billy and Banda. In 2008, Modise received the Order of Luthuli, Silver Class from then President Mbeki for excellent contribution in the achievement of South Africa, free of racial oppression and contribution to the building of a non-racial, non-sexist, democratic South Africa. He also received the Premier's Excellence Award from the Premier of the Free State for his contribution towards the liberation struggle in South Africa in general. In 2017, he was bestowed the Swedish Order of the Polar Star by the Swedish ambassador to South Africa on behalf of His Royal Majesty King Carl Gustaf. Modise was a trustee of the African Center for the Constructive Resolution of Disputes. He also served as a board member of the South African Broadcasting Corporation. Program Director, Minister Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, Dr. Ayanda Taluba, President, His Excellency Cyril Ramaphosa, former President Thabo Mbeki, Mrs. Zanele Mbeki, former President Kgalema Motlanthe and Mrs. Gugu Motlanthe, former First Lady Mama Graça Machel, ministers, members of parliament, mayors, premier, Vice President of Namibia, Your Excellency Nangulo Bumba, ambassadors and high commissioners, the religious clergy, the ANC stalwarts and veterans, family, comrades and friends. Ambassador Modise passed in Gauteng on 20th of June 2018. He is survived by his wife, daughter Thandi, grandson Khosile, sister Dorothy, and numerous nephews and nieces. Robala ka khotso motho e ka gamba e sileng Lecholo, Monkwatu, Omoncho, Opelo Etue.